when you got married, that you were marrying into this, military family, and you were.
He was not military.
Oh.
I met him before. He was the lifeguard at the pool that I went to, and was lovely. And we met, and then he just decided that he does no family history of military, none of that. And so neither of us, I think, had any idea.
You didn't know what you were getting into.
Oh, no.
So
and it's so funny. Like now, like I mean, we're no longer married, but like on this side of it, I mean, I was 17 years, like I'm a seasoned spouse.
Yeah.
and you see like new spouses coming in, you're like, oh, that's so cute. They have no idea.
And I think, as you know, I'm not a veteran, and I don't come from a military family. Yeah. So I think a lot of us don't have any idea. We have a vague idea that, you get separated sometimes, but or you you move around a lot, obviously, and
they tell you, like, my parents are artists. My dad is a veteran. I mean, he was in Vietnam, and, but, he did that. He was drafted and did 2 years and got out, him and my uncle. And so like my dad did the painting behind me. My mom made the jewelry that I wear. Like I did, like I'm an artist daughter. And, and so, like this was not on my radar at all.
Okay. We've got to talk about this. So your dad's a Vietnam veteran.
Yes.
We got to talk. Is he still with us?
Yes.
Okay. We got to talk about this. This is good.
Yeah.
We are starting the program. Hello, Facebook. Hello, YouTube. Sometimes the conversations before we start are more interesting than the conversations we have after we start.
We should say anything.
Hello, everyone. Happy Cosmonautics Day. Happy Cosmonautics Day, everybody. Good to see everyone. Welcome to our VBC Happy Hour. I am Todd. This is Monday, April 12th. It is a damp and a little bit chilly spring day here in Pittsburgh. I hope it's okay where you are. And I want to wish, first of all, everybody a very happy Cosmonautics Day. I'm very curious about how you probably have family traditions for how you commemorate Cosmonautics Day. What did we do in our family, Ellie?
I don't know. Are you going to start something this year?
Yeah. And I hope nobody has any idea what Cosmonautics Day, or this bit is not funny. On this day, 60 years ago, Yuri Gagarin became the first human being in outer space. And in Russia, it is celebrated as Cosmonautics Day because, of course, the Russians called their astronauts cosmonauts, and Yuri Gagarin was the first cosmonaut. And boy, was that big news in 1961. I mean, this was just another piece of evidence that the Kennedy administration had that the Russians were ahead of us, that they were beating us not only in the space race, but maybe in the nuclear race. And this came on the heels of Sputnik, of course, and really accelerated the timetable for the U.S. moonshot that really began in response to Yuri Gagarin's achievement. And Yuri Gagarin was a great hero. Oh my gosh, I'm just going to go on and on about this, so I'm going to stop right now. But there are two other anniversaries I just want to mention. You probably know I'm not a veteran, not a military family. I am a historian, so I love this stuff. It's the 60th anniversary of Yuri Gagarin's trip to outer space. It's the 160th anniversary of what? Any takers?
Fort Sumter.
Yeah, firing upon Fort Sumter in the beginning of the Civil War. The Civil War began 160 years ago today with the firing on Fort Sumter. And does anybody know who fired the first shot on the Union side at Fort Sumter?
I do.
Of course you do, Mary.
Should have hit somebody else.
Somebody other than Mary. Somebody other than Mary.
But wait, I did know that not because of Fort Sumter, not because I'm a tour guide, but because I'm an Orioles fan and a baseball fan.
You can't blame me.
Abner Doubleday. Abner
He's
Doubleday.
credited with it. Yeah.
He's credited with it. He probably didn't find, and he has a great haircut, great hairdo, which I like.
Do you know where he's buried? That's always the second part of my trivia question.
Cooperstown.
That's what everybody thinks.
Of course.
That's what everybody thinks, and everybody's wrong. He's buried at Arlington National Cemetery right there in front of Montgomery Meigs, who, took Lee's land, took that land from Mary Lee.
Very good. And the first person to fire, credited with firing on the Confederate side, was Edmund Ruffin, who was quite a character, ended up committing suicide, I believe, after the surrender at Appomattox Courthouse. Okay. So, and then one more anniversary. Sorry about that. 76 years ago today. Was a very big deal. FDR died. Yeah, FDR died today. 76 years today in a second home in Warm Springs, Georgia. He was there with his girlfriend, the true love of his life, Lucy Mercer. Absolutely loved her, I think. He was so sick, so unhealthy. And he died probably of stroke and heart disease, but he also probably had advanced melanoma and wouldn't have lasted even without that. Okay, so that's enough history. Welcome everybody. Here we go. We have a wonderful program tonight, and it's a little bit varied. And I know we have three special guests who are very generous and with their time joining us tonight. The first is Derek Sansone, who's here to give us an update on the National World War I Memorial that is being built right now in Pershing Park, right across the street from the White House in Washington, D.C. It's kind of unbelievable that it's taken over 100 years for World War I to have a national memorial in Washington, D.C., but it has, and I think there are reasons for that. And we also have Kelcey Liverpool, who's joining us from Chicago. She is the founder and executive director of Kids Rank, that serves children in military families. And why I love this subject is because April is a month of the military child. But you all know that I'm not a veteran, don't come from military family, and it's a growing up, living in, being a member of a military family, I think is qualitatively different than being a member of a civilian normal. I don't want to use the word normal, but a non-military family. And joining us in that conversation is a wonderful writer, Kelly McHugh-Stewart. I'm so happy and thrilled that she responded to my, I think it was a LinkedIn, maybe it was an email. I asked her, I read this wonderful article she wrote for the New York Times that was reprinted in the Reader's Digest, hoping that she would respond and be willing to come on. And actually, let me show you this. I think this is funny, and I think it's a bit of an overstatement. I'm going to ask her what she thinks of this. If any of you are subscribed to the Reader's Digest, here is the cover of the April issue. And you can see that how they pitched it is "I Love Army Food" by Kelly McHugh-Stewart. Kelly, is that an overstatement?
Oh, yeah. That's it's a big overstatement. I was a little shocked to see that, but I also I loved it. I'm like tempted to make it my profile picture.
It got my attention, that's for sure. I love Army food.
Yeah. I liked it as a kid. I can't say I love MREs that much as an adult, but you read the story, yeah.
But I mean, what's so wonderful, and you have no way of knowing this, Kelly, but we talk a lot about MREs here at the Veterans Breakfast Club, and we've had MRE dinners, and we've had the son of the inventor of the MRE on, and we talk a lot about military food, because when you're in the military, food's pretty important. And so reading that article is just such a great thing. And I have to also say, Kelly grew up in a military family, and she's a Gold Star daughter, and so she's going to also share information about her late father, Colonel John McHugh. And but first, I would love to start with the update on the World War I Memorial in Washington, D.C. Derek, Navy CB, thank you for joining us from Buffalo, New York.
Well, thank you, Tad, and good evening, everyone. My name is Derek Sansone. I'm a retired reservist and a member of the Milton J. Brownscheidel American Legion post in Buffalo, New York. My post got behind the memorial project through fundraising efforts, and in recognition, we were named an AEF Memorial Corps post. There will be two parts to the presentation I'll be giving. The first will provide some U.S. World War I history and a short video narrated by Gary Sinise. Second is the informative part about the memorial, the Centennial Commission's efforts, and why I feel it's an important and overdue project. I will be moving a bit quickly and won't be able to monitor the chat, so please jot down any questions for our Q&A session at the end. And I'm going to bring up the presentation.
Derek, before you bring up the Derek, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Before you bring up the presentation, can I interrupt you for just a second?
Absolutely, you're the boss.
Is your brother Brett younger or older?
He is younger, and he is retired Air Force.
He's retired Air Force. He's also on a treadmill on Zoom. I could tell.
He was very motivated.
I just saw a head bobbing up and down, and I figured he's either in a lifeboat or on a treadmill. So okay.
He's almost as motivated as I am. So, you know.
So he's Air Force, you're Navy.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
All right. And I'm going to bring up the presentation. Hopefully everyone will see it. Everyone got it?
No, we don't see it.
Okay. I know we can get through these technical difficulties.
Oh, absolutely we can. Absolutely.
Okay. So you gave me co-host and I want to bring it up now.
Yeah, you are co-host, I believe.
Can you see my screen?
No. Ooh, bad. That's
Have you
not good.
pressed the green share screen button at the bottom of Zoom?
Do you want me to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes, you have to. You do that, Derek, please. Yeah. There we go. There we go. We got it.
All right. And over the top we go, hopefully. The United States World War I Centennial Commission. I will speak more about them throughout the presentation. I like this picture because of the Tommy helmets, bayonets, and what appears to be a water-cooled machine gun. And this is the video from the Centennial Commission's website. It's only 3 minutes long.
Derek, I think you have to share the sound. If you click in, when you go to share screen. Yeah, I'm sorry about that. When you go to the green button, share screen, there should be a little box in the corner that says share sound also. And it might also say optimize for video.
Yeah, what I'll do is take down your slideshow so that you can restart it. And when you bring it up again, you can hit share sound at the bottom.
Okay.
Derek doesn't do technology.
No. Is that my Air Force brother on there?
Yeah, that is your Air Force brother.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
I clicked share sound and we're ready to go again. All right. Thank you for your help, Brett.
They were called doughboys. Then, as now, no one was exactly sure why. Like the name, their heroic deeds fade from memory. It is time to remember. April 1917. The United States enters World War I. For 2.5 years, France and Great Britain have been deadlocked in an epic struggle with Imperial Germany. Millions are dead. Democracy threatened. Can America make the difference? Doughboys would come from every walk of life and all ethnicities. A resolute wave of African Americans, Native Americans, new immigrants, raw-boned farmhands, Ivy Leaguers. An English nurse wrote, "So these were our deliverers at last. So godlike, so magnificent, so splendidly unimpaired, and so timely." Americans entered the front lines in January 1918. A Marine commander, advised to retreat by a French colleague, answered, "Retreat? Hell, we just got here." More than 1 million young Americans would fight 13 key battles, vanguard of an army 4 million strong. No one on either side anticipated how quickly they would arrive, engage, and decisively impact the war. The carnage ended on November 11th, 1918. American resolve had stopped the killing. By itself, World War I did not, could not, make the world safe for democracy. Liberty must always be defended, strengthened, and cherished. On the fields of France, 116,516 doughboys affirmed this with their lives. During 6 months of brutal combat, more Americans fell than in a decade of war in Korea and Vietnam combined. A higher casualty rate than World War II. Today, in our nation's capital, every major American war fought in defense of freedom is honored with a national memorial, save World War I. The unprecedented sacrifice of Americans to conclusively end a world war is more than worthy of this recognition, long overdue. With your help, the World War I Centennial Commission will dedicate this memorial in Pershing Park. It is time to honor their sacrifice and renew our pledge to protect our future by remembering our past.
The flag of Imperial Germany that we're not used to seeing anymore, along with the 48-star US flag. The 42nd Rainbow Division was comprised of personnel from 26 states, including Washington, D.C. It was said that the division stretched across the U.S. like a rainbow, and they were one of the most heavily engaged U.S. divisions of the war. Young Douglas MacArthur, brigade commander in the 42nd. Next to him, George Patton in front of a French Renault light tank. Wild Bill Donovan, regimental commander in the 42nd. He went on to lead the OSS during World War II. The 77th Liberty Division, draftee division from New York City, ethnically diverse like the city they came from, made up of native-born U.S. citizens and newly arrived immigrants. Commanding officer of the Lost Battalion. They were part of the 77th, and they stood strong in the Argonne Forest. The Hello Girls, America's first women soldiers, formerly known as the Signal Corps female telephone operators. These women were recruited from U.S. phone companies to handle communications challenges faced by the AEF in France. And there is a documentary about the Hello Girls on Amazon Prime. Sergeant Alvin York of the 82nd All-American Division. In the picture is the unit shoulder patch before they became the Airborne Division we know today. Sergeant Johnson of the famous Harlem Hellfighters. They served under French command wearing the blue helmets for most of the war. They fought with unusual tenacity. Young Colonel Marshall, who did AEF level staff planning for almost every major U.S. operation of the war. Next to him, young artillery officer Harry S. Truman. The Lafayette Escadrille were American pilots who flew for the French Air Force before the US entry. Think of them as the RAF Eagle Squadron of World War I. Raoul Lufberry, the most highly decorated pilot of the Escadrille. When the US entered, Billy Mitchell said that he was the only American he'd put up against the Red Baron. Until these two men came along, Eddie Rickenbacker, the top American ace of the war, buried in Columbus, Ohio, and balloon buster Frank Luke, buried in the Meuse-Argonne American Cemetery in France. Luke Air Force Base is named in his honor. Air Force veterans know who Billy Mitchell is. He's known as the father of the United States Air Force. Sergeant Major Daly, a crusty old Marine if there ever was one. He is one of, I believe, only 13 Americans awarded 2 Medals of Honor. A famous painting of Marines assaulting a German position in Belleau Wood. The Battle of Belleau Wood has been called the birth of the modern Marine Corps. All Marines know who General Lejeune is. Not many Marines have Army divisional shoulder patches on their uniforms. World War I will forever link the Marines with the 2nd Infantry Division. Admiral Sims worked closely with the British, developing convoy escorts to protect Atlantic shipping against German U-boats, and he won the Pulitzer Prize after the war. A famous War Bond Drive poster, notice the spikes on the old style German helmets. General John Blackjack Pershing, a man who needs no introduction. He was commander of the American Expeditionary Forces. President Woodrow Wilson, a man who had little interest in the military or foreign policy when he took office, but effective diplomatically with the 14 Points and League of Nations. The Doughboy Foundation, I'll speak more about them in a few minutes. And some US World War I statistics. I'll give everyone just a moment to look at those before we roll into the next shorter presentation. All right, the United States World War I Centennial Commission, they were it. Their mission was to honor, commemorate, and educate, and to plan and execute programs commemorating the centennial. Their parent organization, the United States Foundation for the Commemoration of the World Wars. The honor portion, this is not an all-inclusive slide of their many programs, but principally they designed and built America's National World War I Memorial. They were involved in the 100 Cities, 100 Memorials program, Valor Medal reviews, recognition of the Hello Girls, and the rededication of the Lafayette Escadrille Memorial in France. Commemorate portion, the Bells of Peace is a phone app. Tolls the bells on November 11th at 11 a.m., both during and now after the centennial years. The U.S. Mint had a commemorative silver dollar. The Postal Service had a stamp, among with many other commemorative efforts nationwide. The education piece, they had monthly dispatch newsletters and podcasts. Camp Doughboy was interesting. World War II reenactors retrained for trench warfare. They had contests in the New York City school districts, teacher training workshops, and they held many events and exhibits at museums and universities nationwide. I know some of this is cut off because of the pictures, but just a few of the partner organizations and sponsors. The Pritzker Military Museum and Library was huge. They matched private donations dollar for dollar. The American Battle Monuments Commission is the organization who works with the host nations overseas, maintaining the American cemeteries. Legion and VFW posts, Amazon Smile, among with many others. Just a little bit of history. In January of 13, the public law was signed by the president, creating the Centennial Commission. In May of 15, the design competition was announced. Hundreds of artists submitted designs. January of 16, the winning design was chosen. At that point, the fundraising, educational, and media campaigns began. Fast forward to 2019, after some revisions, the Fine Arts Commission and the Park Service granted final approval for the memorial in the park. And in December, the permits were issued, the groundbreaking was held, and construction began. Little bit of general information. As we know, the Washington Mall is home to many memorials. But prior to the Centennial Commission's establishment, the Park Service said that there was no room for another major memorial on the mall. So Pershing Park on Pennsylvania Avenue was chosen, but during the centennial years, it was placed on the historic registry, which delayed things. But the memorial was funded privately by only corporate, organizational, and individual donations, no taxpayer dollars. Now, the first presentation showed famous Americans and stated that over 4.5 million served. Most were regular soldiers and sailors, like Private George Hogg, who's pictured. Every conflict has families sacrificing on the home front, but World War I really was a national effort. Because of unprecedented logistical challenges, civilian dock workers went to France, US industry and shipping was nationalized, there was war bond and recycling drives, women and minorities served in the AAF. Rosie the Riveter had a mother, and she worked in US factories during World War I. So the memorial is for all Americans of the forgotten generation who struggled to raise families during the Great Depression to then send their kids off to World War II. Said I'd speak a bit more about the Doughboy Foundation. The Centennial Commission's charter to commemorate the World War I centennial is finished. The signing of the Versailles Peace Treaty was the last event, and they have stood down except for actually building the National Memorial. So the mission of the Doughboy Foundation, the torch has been passed. They will keep faith with our World War I veterans. They'll be involved with memorial maintenance, Veterans Day, and other events to make the park and the memorial a living space. More recently, they've been involved with the Doughboy MIA project. Now we're getting to the end here, just the last few slides. The next two have 5 quotes that were selected to be on the memorial and at the park. I'm not going to read them verbatim, but I don't think that any World War I memorial would be complete without the words of General Pershing or President Wilson. So it's not a surprise that these 2 gentlemen were picked. The next 3, one from a man named Archibald MacLeish, World War I vet and poet. The next one from a woman named Alta Mae Andrews. She was a US Army nurse during World War I. And the last one, they were mortal, but they were unconquerable, from one of my favorite authors, Willa Cather, from her book, One of Ours, about a young man from her hometown who went off to the trenches of France. So the soldier's journey, that's the artist's title for his design. The picture is a bit outdated. The video showed bayonets on the rifles and the stars and stripes on the flag. Unfortunately, the back is a little bit cut off. But from the beginning, you have the soldier leaving his family, the daughter giving him his helmet. The soldier enters the Brotherhood of Arms, enters combat, and combat intensifies. The upward diagonal in the wreckage symbolizes America's emergence from the war. You have nurses coming on the scene to care for the wounded. Then a reconstitution period where you can see one soldier looking back and symbolically the other 2 looking forward. And then at the end, you may have seen it on the video, is the soldier returning home and giving his helmet back to his daughter, symbolizing passing the torch to the next generation who would fight World War II. And noticeably missing is the wife and daughter at the end. I've been told that that represents the Spanish flu deaths in the United States toward the end of the war and into 1919. And that was at a time where US forces were still deployed, occupying German border provinces, and in Russia during their civil war. So the memorial doesn't just represent a soldier's journey, but a nation's journey. And I mentioned the diversity of the AAF a few minutes ago. The nation came together at a time when women couldn't vote, but the war was the first conflict where women served in capacities other than nurses. Now, as the father of a daughter, I believe that these stories must be told so that our American girls can identify with our history and understand the places that women have had in it. Minorities also served under less than ideal conditions, but still they stepped up and they went forward to fight for an ideal. And these aren't just female or African American stories or Italian or Jewish American stories. These are American stories. And the AEF foreshadowed how the US would slowly change in the 20th century, which is called the American century, and all Americans have stories within it. So in conclusion, if in Washington, D.C., don't just take the kids to the World War II memorial. The forgotten generation fulfilled their responsibility to us. By remembering them, we remain connected to them. I feel we have to ensure that our kids know what it means to be Americans by learning not only about the struggles and sacrifices, but the accomplishments of those who came before us. So take the kids to the World War I memorial so they can experience part one of the story. And where we are now, I'm going to show everybody really quickly exactly where we're at now. We're going to go to the Centennial Commission's website, the homepage. Like any other homepage, there is just a ton of information up top. When you scroll down just a little bit, you'll see the 2-minute animated rendering of what Pershing Park will look like both day and night when it's completed. You saw some of it during the video, but this shows more.
And Derek, you're going to have to, I think, stop your share screen and then share your browser screen so we can see that video.
Oh, well, I wasn't going to run the whole thing. I just wanted,
okay.
yeah, we're running out of time here. I just wanted to show everyone where it
Okay.
was so that they can see it themselves.
Yes. Yeah. And Ellie put here on the Zoom side that website in the chat if you want to bring it up. It's really cool. It has a cam that shows the progress of the construction. Derek,
Okay.
are you done?
I had one more thing.
Okay, one more thing.
If I can go back to the homepage.
You want to go back to?
Can everyone see it?
No, you have to share screen again. You are really good, Derek. Wow. Your brother is so wrong about you. You are really, really good.
Okay, are we back up?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, just below the rendering, usually this section shows videos for all the programs that the Centennial Commission was involved in. I only mentioned a couple, but this Friday is the inaugural flag raising and the park opening. So if anyone's interested, this Friday, this is where you would register for the event on the website. And I wanted to, as we wrap up here, the last 30 seconds, wanted to show everyone the construction cam. This is the day in the nation's capital, what it looks like today. Over the last few days, the fences have come down. Now I'm going to run the time lapse as we wrap up here. I mentioned that this project began in December of 19, and because the winter of 20 was so mild, they were able to do more than just preliminary site work. But with everything that the nation and the capital went through last year, this construction company did not miss one day of work, and they got us where we're at today by opening the park and running up the flag. The statues, the bronze casts are still being poured in the UK. But with that, I'd like to thank everyone. I hope you found the presentation interesting and informative. I'd like to thank Todd for having me as a guest on his show. And with Todd's permission, I think we can go into any questions.
Yeah, let's ask questions. Why don't you stop sharing your screen? Okay. People, if they have comments or questions, family members who maybe served in World War I, questions about the memorial, about the war. Derek, that was really, really good. You know your stuff.
Thank you. Am I not sharing anymore?
No, you're not sharing anymore.
Okay.
And people speak up. Leo, were you going to say something? Yeah, Leo West. Why don't you unmute yourself there, Leo, Korean War veteran. Hey, Leo.
Hi, Todd. My father was in World War I in the 28th Division of Pennsylvania, the Bucket of Blood. And I was just wondering if it's going to be represented there.
Specifically, I don't know if there's a section to represent the specific divisions. In the center of the park, if you go back and watch the video when you have time, there is a big round informational kiosk, and I know that the U.S. campaigns are all around the front, and there's a lot of information inside. I don't know if there's going to be specific info about divisions. I don't know.
Leo, did your father ever talk about his service in World War One?
Yes, remember the book I gave you?
Yeah. Did he tell you stories?
Yes. I mean, that kind of story, because he was wounded in the Argonne. And in fact, that's where he got his idea of walking away from hospitals, because he was left because of triage. They left him out there because they didn't think he was going to make it. And they came back out after operating on everybody else and say, "You still here?" And they took him in and they worked on his leg. And at Christmas time, after the armistice, he was down to something like 80 pounds, and he had been about 180 when he was.
Oh my!
And he never got above 140 until after he had a heart attack when he was 70 years old or 75. And at that time, he went up to 160.
Oh my, Leo. So Leo, did you kind of grow up with some of those war stories, or was you quiet about it when you were a child?
A little bit. He was very active with the Legion.
Okay.
And and then he formed a chapter of the DAV, and they built a home on the highway, and eventually became our home, because the organization that was sponsoring it, they weren't all wounded veterans. There were about maybe a dozen wounded veterans, and the rest were just associated veterans.
Did he give you any advice when you joined the Army?
Not much, just stay out of trouble.
Keep your head down. Right. Thank you, Leo. Oh gosh, is that interesting? You just feel like you're touching history here with these stories. Let me ask you, Derek, what got you interested in World War One? You're I called you an expert and you demurred, but you sure know a heck of a lot about the war and the memorial. Why? What draws you to it?
Well, I am an American history buff. I drive my wife and daughter insane with American history. But when we entered the centennial years, I ran across the commission being stood up, and like a lot of other people, I was surprised that after all these years, there was not a memorial in Washington, D.C., where World War II, Korea, and Vietnam were. It made it sound to me like the government worked a little bit backwards for the four major wars of the 20th century. And I don't know, it almost became an addiction. I just started devouring every book that I could through the centennial years, and the addiction just hasn't ended. I'm still reading about the First World War and watching anything I can, because it's a hole in our history.
It's totally a hole in our history.
Yeah, and this was a generation that stepped up and fought a world war to a scale that the United States had never been involved with. And, the Great Depression and World War II cast a big shadow for a lot of different reasons, but it puts us where we are today. And, at least that generation is getting what they deserve.
Absolutely. And I would say, I think there are a couple reasons why it's kind of forgotten and it's not talked about as much. Number one, it's hard to understand. It was a non-ideological war. We're used to ideological wars. Fascism versus liberal democracy versus communism. Oh, I'm sorry. I was launching a lecture and I see Ben Wright has his hand up. Ben, I'm sorry.
Oh, well, I was just going to comment. I'm glad to see it. Of course, the British had much greater losses, but if you ever spend a Remembrance Day or Remembrance Sunday in England, I mean, it's amazing, the tribute to the World War I veterans and the Great War and how many people they've lost. and we're just now going to catch up with the recognition of the losses here. I remember as a kid growing up, a couple of people in my hometown who were World War I veterans, one of whom had serious difficulties because his lungs were seriously injured by mustard gas on the battlefields in France. So there were a lot of people that paid a very heavy price for freedom in Europe in World War I.
Peter Thens.
Hi, guys. Just a quick question, Todd. Since Ben brought up about how it's the Remembrance Day, especially in Great Britain, this is such a big deal with the poppies. Now over there, if you're wearing a poppy, there's a specific way to wear it. You wear it on your lapel at the 11 o'clock position, because, as you know, anybody knows from World War I, it was the 11th hour of the 11th day that the armistice was officially signed, or I'm sorry, that the peace was official. So do we kind of follow that same rule over here in the States, or is that just something that, you know, I kind of learned from just the Brits?
Ben, do you know the answer to that question?
Well, Poppy Day, did come from World War I. I understand the tradition, and I actually have some imported British poppies from the British Legion that have the leaf that Peter's talking about. And you go, if you're in England during Remembrance Day or Remembrance Day Sunday, you will not find anyone anywhere that's not wearing one of them.
Yeah. Great Britain lost more men in World War I than they did in World War II, which was a war 10 times as large. I mean, it's unbelievable. But I think Mr. Masters is here, Scott Masters, who teaches history. It's a hard subject to teach, I was going to say, because it's a non-ideological war. These were monarchs fighting monarchs, largely. And it had this inconclusive piece that clearly set up Part two, which we call World War II. And I think that the veterans who returned home from World War I, in triumph, got really quickly disillusioned with the Versailles Treaty and the failure of the Senate to ratify it and the failure of the League of Nations. And it was just clear that Europe was barreling toward another reckoning. And it just, I think those veterans, the country kind of fell out of love with those veterans, as they seem to do with their veterans with different wars. So I think they Scott, Mr. Masters.
Please call me Scott. We're on April break now, so I'm not Mr. Masters for the next few weeks. I just wanted to say a big part of the reason I became a history teacher had to do with my grandfather, who was a World War I veteran. He was born in 1885 in Nova Scotia, and he lived to be 105. So I got to know him quite well growing up. And he was actually in the very first gas attack at Ypres in Belgium in 1915. And he served all the way until the last few months of the war. He was discharged as medically unfit just in the last few months, but all my life growing up, I talked to him and he really got me interested in things.
Oh my gosh, what a treasure. What an opportunity. Sharon George asks here, Derek, can you talk about trench warfare?
The beginning of it, or what happened? Well, this is a little off the U.S. history, but back in 1914, that was the end of the maneuver war in World War I. When the BEF landed in Belgium and the French raced at the Miracle de Marne to stop the Germans from trying to encircle Paris, in the north, it started what was called the Race to the Sea. And once they got to the Belgian coast, there was no more flanks to turn. And so the Western Front stretched from the Belgian coast down to the Alps near the Italian border. And that's where it got locked into. I don't think that any of the belligerents had that intention to have 3 years of static warfare. From what I understand, General Pershing had very little interest in trench warfare and wanted to turn it into a maneuver war again. But in order to do that, he's looked at in history as putting a lot of American bodies in front of German machine guns to make those breakthroughs.
Yep.
Very
eloquently put. Yeah. So to just repeat what Derek said, because I think it's so interesting, is the killing in World War I happened when the soldiers were not in trenches. The trench was the safest place to be. And that's why soldiers dug them. I mean, lots were killed in the trenches, don't get me wrong, and they were horrible places to be. But it was just so happened that there was a mismatch of tactics and technology. The technology all favored defense. And so offensive operations were impossible. And defensive positions were impregnable. And so you had these two trench lines stretching, as Derek said, from the North Sea to the Swiss border, 600 miles worth or so by, Thanksgiving Day, 1914. And that trench network, if you had it in the Eastern Front, it's like 25,000 miles of trenches in Europe that were dug in 4 years. 25,000 miles. You could see them now. You could still see them today. But they were necessary because there was no movement. There couldn't be movement. Anytime you left the trench and went over the top, that's when the killing really got bad. Mark. You're going to try and make me say your last name here. Yeah, I'm going to ask you to be. How you doing, Mark?
Sorry. I just, a quick comment. With trench warfare, if you went to the American or the Army Heritage Center in Carlisle, and believe me, if you live within a day's drive of there, it is worth it. They have a replica of that trench that as you walk through it, if tears don't run through your eyes, and fear doesn't enter your body, you aren't human. It's just an amazing place to go. It's not just that trench, it's all of the wars that the Army has fought in at the Army Heritage Center.
Oh, great stuff. Thank you, Mark. Derek, thank you so much for giving us this information. And again, hopefully, I think Ellie has put it on the Facebook side and here on the Zoom side about the World War II Memorial. The first flag raising there at the memorial will be 10 a.m. Eastern on Friday, April 16th. And you can watch it virtually. Thank you, Derek. I appreciate this. It makes me realize we should do some kind of program dealing with World War I, because these are interesting stories. And you get to lead it, Derek. Thank you for offering to do that.
I think I've just been drafted.
Yeah, that's right. You've just been drafted.
Voluntold.
Thank you.
Yeah, voluntold. It's also, as I said, the month of the military child, and we thought we'd have some conversations about that this month. What it's like to grow up in a military family, to live in a military family, what makes military families unique, what are the strengths that children growing up in a military family have, what are the challenges that they face. We have two people here to talk about it. Kelcey Liverpool, thank you very much for joining us, Kelcey. And we have Kelly McHugh-Stewart. Hello, Kelly. And where are you joining us from? New York City?
Yeah, I live in Hoboken, New Jersey, so I'm just over the river. Yeah.
Hoboken and Chicago. Perfect. Let me ask you, Kelcey, and I know we were talking a little bit before we started, and I assume that when you got married, your husband was already in the service, but he wasn't. It was like you entered together. I mean, he entered. Did you have any idea what you were getting into when your husband signed up for a military career?
Zero. I mean, you hear about, the military and what that, and actually I grew up in Philadelphia, and my world was not, I grew up and lived in the city, and my parents are artists, and I did not have a background. My dad served in Vietnam and was drafted and served for 2 years, he and his brother. But I didn't, other than that, and he did not talk about his time in service very much. And so I didn't really know much about it before going in. And for 17 years, I was a spouse, traveling all over, moving 9 times, living overseas. We were stationed in Japan. and having kids doing all of that. So
Was it Army?
Navy.
Navy. Okay, Navy.
Navy.
And what, and I guess you probably are asked this a lot, but what would you tell, well, first of all, what would you tell people like me who don't come from military families? How do you begin to describe what should people know about what makes military families a little different?
I think that we're just so used to adapting and adjusting and kind of rolling with things. The pandemic, I mean, really illustrated it for me. We're all going through it, but I think a military family, we're used to being separated from people, having life interrupted, kind of all of these challenges that people are experiencing during the pandemic, that it's been helpful in processing certain things. I mean, it's not the answer, but but I mean, it's adjusting to new circumstances, kind of on the fly, that hurry up and wait mentality. Really, it's a real thing.
And it's so different, I imagine, than when you were a child or before you were a child, maybe, and your father was in the service. The all volunteer force,
absolutely,
the demands on the all volunteer force, I should say, are so much greater.
I mean, you figure that, at a certain point, the country, 25% of men were in the military, drafted in the military. And now we make up less than 1%, military of the population. And so the demands on that and the families, I mean, over 50% of our currently serving are children of veterans. So over half of the kids that I serve in my program will potentially be our next volunteer force. I mean, I have two, my daughters are 17 and 19, and we just went to MEPS this week, and my daughter is going to be a Coastie. So she's,
oh my gosh.
Coast Guards.
Okay. All right.
So we fit the statistic.
Ida May is so happy. Ida May was clapping the Coast Guard. Yay. We have to get her on to talk about, when does she go in?
So she is supposed to go to boot camp June 15th, the day after her birthday.
Oh man. And so boot camp will be what, 12 weeks?
I think it's 8 weeks in Jersey.
Okay.
And I believe it's about 8 weeks, but she'll finish her second 2 years of college, and then she'll come out and go in she'll go through OCS, Officer Cadet School, and become an officer. Yeah.
Oh man, I would love to have her on after she's graduates boot camp to talk about what boot camp was like and compare notes with some of the people who are here. That would be fantastic. I was reading something in the chat, and I'm going to have to admit that I think I heard what you said before. Did you say that 50%, 50% of all people serving in the military have had families?
Our children, not just family. That number goes up to about 80% if you talk like grandparents, aunts and uncles, and things like that. But it's over 50% are children of service of veterans. So it's really become this generational family tradition.
Family business.
Yeah. And it's a lot to place. I mean, figuring that we've been at war for, 20 years now, it's a lot to, our Guard is being called to service more than ever before. I mean, it's a very different environment placed on a very small group of the population.
So your organization, Kids Rank, which serves and kidsrank.org, and we could share, I will share it, the website here. You founded it. It provides support for children in military families.
Absolutely, specifically for the kids. So our program supports their social and emotional needs, because research around military children, as long as we've had a military, research around the kids and the impact is only about 20 years old. So they're really not a lot of data long-term, talking about, what the kids might experience and what they're going through. And so we felt that there was a gap in this service. They were kind of this population, the people focus on the veterans and the service members, and there's programs for the spouses, but there's not as much for the kids.
Exactly. And this website is so good. You have a really good person working on your website. It's really well done. And I do encourage people to check out, it's kidsrank.org. But you made me think that the importance of your organization is not just supporting children in the military, but it's now almost like a national security issue, because you're supporting the children who are going to grow up and serve in the military on our behalf.
Absolutely. I mean, we really recognize, we've talked a lot about, how we do that, how communities do that, because 80% of the kids go to schools in civilian communities. It's different now. We're living in civilian communities. And so it's not like when we lived on the post, historically and had, that like the DOD schools and
Right.
and those kinds of things.
Right.
I mean, my kids in Japan went to a DOD school because overseas they still have a lot of those, but not so much stateside. And so it really is a need for them to have that kind of support, because we want our next serving force to be, well-adjusted, emotionally stable, confident leaders. And in order to do that, they need some resources to make sure that they're not falling through the cracks. And, with all the transitions that they go through and going to new schools and leaving family, have parents going away, serving. So, yeah.
Oh, that's so neat. Richard Kaufman, you have your hand up. Richard from Oregon. How are you, Richard? I'm going to ask you to unmute.
Yeah, I was speaking of military families. That's interesting how military families adapt. My father was in the service, and I had two brothers and a sister. And as a military brat, as they say, I went to 10 schools in my 12 grades. So yeah, it's nothing like coming into a school you've never been to right in the middle of the term and being the new kid. Absolutely. 10 times. So you learn how to adapt. Both of my brothers served. My one brother served for 20 years. My other brother served for 4 years. I served for 4 years. And my sister married a guy who served for 20 years. So do the math. That's a lot of years for a family.
A lot of years for one family to devote.
And that's pretty common.
And that's pretty common. Mark Spiridigliosi.
That was good.
I thought it was pretty good.
That's a mistake. I have no idea why my hand's up, Todd, but hey,
well, you got to say something, Mark.
Well, I also have a long history. My father served in World War II. I had two brothers in Vietnam before me, a brother that served in the Air Force prior to all of that. So as I was sitting here trying to do the math, it adds up to about 40 or 50 years of us in the military. And I'll take my hand down, Todd. I apologize.
Let's bring Kelly McHugh-Stewart. What was your life growing up in a military family? I mean, could you relate to this?
Oh my gosh, yeah, definitely. So by the time I was 18 years old, I'd moved 12 times and been to numerous different schools. We lived in Germany and my mom homeschooled for a little while. So it definitely is, that we moved all over the place. But and then also touching on it being like the family business or having kids go in, my older brother, he served for almost 10 years and got out. He was in the Army and he was a Black Hawk pilot, had a few deployments. He went to Iraq and Afghanistan, but he's out now and flying for American Airlines. But he, got his start with his career flying in the military. And then my sister, her husband is in the Air Force. He also comes from a family that's his dad was Navy, his brother's Army. So it really is very much that, like, I think you're more likely to join almost if your parents were in it. And I have numerous friends just from growing up in the military who are serving right now. So yeah.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, so I can definitely relate. And actually, Mark, you talked about Carlisle and the Army Heritage Center. My dad was stationed. We were at Carlisle. So we were only there for 10 months. So that was actually my senior year of high school, which was that was probably the hardest move for me as a military child. We had lived in Fort Rucker, Alabama for 3.5 years, which was the longest I'd ever lived anywhere. So from about 9th grade to 11th grade, or between 8th and 9th grade and to 11th grade, I lived in one place. I was on a soccer team. So I kind of had what felt like stability. And then my senior year, my dad came back from a deployment and then was accepted into the Army War College. So we moved my senior year of high school, which at the time obviously was devastating, but it was actually a really fun year for my family, because when your parent is at the war college, they're basically a college student for a year. So it wasn't the same, full-time job in that sense. My dad, obviously worked very hard and was studying, but he had a very flexible schedule. So we did a lot of trips to Washington, D.C. My dad's family was from New Jersey. And so we got to come out to visit a lot of family. So there's a lot of highs and lows as a military kid. But I think when you're going through it, it's all you know. So
I was going to say exactly the same thing. You don't notice that there's anything different, that because it's the only life that you know. And I think that like my job and what we like to think of it from a strength-based perspective, that, there are really so many wonderful qualities that you get from being part of our families. And so, we really focus on those. We acknowledge that there are challenges, but like really looking at, the ability to make new friends in new places, that you have people all over the world that you might know and can travel and do all of those kinds of things. So we definitely look at that strength, but it is harder as you get older, because you start making those connections and those relationships, and then you have to sometimes say goodbye, and which can be really, it's different now with technology. My kids, when I first got married and I would try to call, like talk to my husband when he was away, if you missed the phone call, it was devastating, or if you were trying to email, and now their dad will call and they're like, we're busy. Because he has this smartphone and they can FaceTime him, and they can, so technology has been great in a lot of ways to help keep families feeling connected to people that they're leaving.
I was going to throw out a statement and have you challenge it if you wanted to, but you kind of have already. I was going to here's a statement that I'm not saying that I'm endorsing, but I'm saying it's coming to mind as I'm hearing these stories about, moving 10 times in 12 years. The military life is fundamentally unhealthy for children.
Oh, I disagree with that.
Please, good.
Kelcey.
I disagree.
Yeah.
Good.
I'll let you go into it a little bit more, since I feel like you're everything you're doing is,
I think that like any child, experiences challenges. It just is how you approach it. And so, yes, military has its set of challenges, but by no means would I ever feel like they are at any kind of disadvantage. Like it burns me. I think that we produce some of the most, I would say well-adjusted, but, really compassionate, open-minded, gritty, resilient, like all of those things, because they have to experience situations. And it's not that like, so police officer children have that whole sense of, what their parents being in danger. Business people, they move all the time. Like there are all these other jobs that kind of reflect some of the things that military kids go through, but military kids experience all of those things all at the same time in very short spurts. And so that's what makes it such a challenge. But again, it's the only thing that you know. And so you just, and, I do think military families are very prideful. Wonderfully so, like I think that they, it's wonderful. We try to instill that what your parents do is really important for all of us in the country. We are, your parents, you should be proud. Our groups of kids are called prides, because we really want to instill that you should be very proud of what your parents are doing. And, to what Derek said, I don't remember whether it was Derek that said it, that talked about the importance of learning history and honoring those that have served before. That's so important. I don't think that should be forgotten or disregarded, at how important that is to understand that we have the freedoms here in this country today because of what people have done and what they've sacrificed.
Boy, Kelcey, you are so eloquent on this issue. Hughes Turner, you have your hand up.
Oh yeah, Kelcey's great at all.
Oh man.
Yeah, I would just echo what Kelcey said earlier. I grew up in the military. My dad was a career soldier, and then I wound up doing 30 years myself after that. And I think, you kind of, I was born in an Army hospital. I only lived on military bases overseas. I only went to DOD schools. And so that was my norm. And I don't think that I really thought about it much until we probably got to high school. And because then I think there becomes a significant shift in terms of attitude of kids and the associations they make, and then wanting stability as you prepare for college and all these other things without disrupting those high school years. And I can't remember the woman's name who mentioned they moved to Carlisle her senior year.
Kelly. Yeah,
Kelly. That was something I give my parents, my dad in particular, great credit for that. He did not want to put my brothers and myself through that episode. And so our 4 years in high school, we were in the same place in Okinawa. And so he made a conscious decision to turn down some other assignments in order for us to have that type of stability. And that stuck with me myself as I became a career military officer. And I remembered my experiences, and I wanted to ensure that my own kids had those opportunities as well to develop, close camaraderie with the high school students, and they stayed in the same place. And I think we see more and more of that. There's always a challenge, I think, for the parents. When you get the PCS orders, okay, do we go as a family, or does somebody wind up being the GO bachelor? The family stays in one place and you go ahead and move forward to that next assignment. And that's always a challenge. I think I see more and more folks opting for the decision, hey, I want stability for my kids, especially when they get to high school. I'm going to leave them where they are, as opposed to moving them when I move. But that also creates its own set of issues in terms of relationships between the spouses and your relationship with the kids, with the distance factor.
Oh, yeah.
That's what we did. We were
Kelcey.
a match family. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to hit back on moving, because I think I started with that. And like I said, I was a teenager, and at the time it was big. Looking back at my military childhood, I've seen much more how much it's benefited me. And also our move to Carlisle, my dad was coming off of a year deployment. And so there was a lot of talk with maybe he could go to the year college, or to the war college for a year on his own, and we could stay in Alabama. But I'm one of 5 siblings. And so I had my younger brother at the time, I think was only 3 or 4 years old. And so that would be another year of my dad missing life with all of us. And, so like I said, I think with 5 kids and the military career, somebody had to get the hard end of the deal. But even looking back, like I said, that year was, looking back down, now my dad passed away a year later. And so it was just a great time with our family. But it is, I feel for military parents, because it is, I have emails, because my dad was deployed that year before, of me as an angry 16-year-old, 17-year-old, like, why are we moving? And he's like, we're looking, he's like, if there's any way I can keep you there, I'm trying to. And so it's like, looking back now as an adult, as almost 30, it's so interesting, the decisions my parents had to make as military parents as well. So yeah, it's not always easy on everyone.
Not easy decisions.
Yeah, but I did want to go back to Todd, also what you had said about how maybe it's like harmful, or not harm, but like it's not the best childhood for kids. Because I do feel like as an adult, I am so grateful for the 18 years I had as a military child. My husband always laughs because, pre-COVID, when we go to parties, he'd be like, you're a friend of everybody in the room. Or like, you can go to a party and relate to everybody there. I've lived in like 10 different states. I've lived in Germany. I've done, the amount of different experiences my family has had, it's kind of like, or I have a friend that lives here or there. So it really makes you super relatable in a weird way to a lot of people. But then on the flip side of that, like just very adaptable, very go with the flow, think on your feet. I feel like a lot of these things that I was told as a kid, that like, this is what you're getting out of your time in the military, as an adult now in a career, I can kind of really see that. And so
you're getting the payoff. You're getting the payoff.
Definitely. Yeah.
For some early challenges.
Yes.
In life. I'm going to share the Kids Rank website again, because you'll get to see a picture of Kelcey with her two wonderful daughters, one of whom is joining the Coast Guard, going to boot camp in June. And so they clearly enjoyed the military life enough, at least, one of them, to join. Let me ask you specifically, Kelcey, what does Kids Rank do? What kind of programs, and I'm looking at the programs here, and how can people get involved?
So we do kind of the core of our program, our weekly meetings. So the kids meet in groups of about 10 kids, age appropriate from kindergarten through 8th grade. So kindergarten through 2nd, 3rd through 5th, and 6th through 8th. And actually this spring we'll be starting something for the older kids, but it's an opportunity for them to connect with each other, because that's such a huge thing. I mean, I work a lot in the veteran space, and we, hear about vets that want to connect with each other because you have that common experience, right? And so for us, it's the same thing. We want these kids to have an opportunity so they don't have to explain why a parent is Geo Bachelor, or why they are coming in at the middle of the school year, or why they stand up at a movie at the beginning because they're playing the Pledge of Allegiance at the theater. I mean, there are all these experiences that are uniquely military that they all understand. And so, and then they work on leadership activities. And one of our biggest components is service. So we figure that the parents serve their country. We want the kids to serve their community. So really, as a way of kind of getting outside of themselves, sometimes you can isolate when you're moving so much. And so by giving back, sometimes you can see that there are other people in communities that you're living in that may need a hand or need support. And so we do a ton of volunteer service, but most of what we do, we try to keep it very authentically military. The kids earn ribbons for their service. So we do ribbon pinning ceremonies, and the ribbons are based on what we feel are their positive qualities that we would want them. So they're ribbons that we'd want them to embody. So it being adapt, bravery, courage. Right now they're working on their ribbons of patience, which we can all use. And so, we like to do a lot of skill building. So we have an entrepreneurial program. We're doing all these different workshops in May, photography, so they can do some photojournalism. And so we just really like to give the kids something that they feel very connected to. And this year, what we've moved into is really around the talk of the mental health of military kids, which is a very taboo subject in military culture. Talking about mental health, I mean, it's really a difficult topic, and there's such a stigma around it because it can impact, even for down to the kid. You think about a service member, if they're seeking medical service, that may impact their careers. That happens with the families as well. I mean, I have literally had a mother, a parent, a spouse who was suicidal and was afraid to go seek mental health services because she was afraid of how it was going to impact her husband's career. And that's very sad to me. And I think that as a community that we have to do better at supporting that. And so we've put together this foundation series. Actually, this Thursday is our next upcoming one, Foundations. And it really is an opportunity where we're connecting with the community around how we best support military kids as they transition in and out of communities. So whether that's schools or mental health providers or community partners or commands, we really want to make sure that they have the best opportunity. But being Month of the Military Child, we didn't just do one like we usually. We're doing 3. We did Sesame Street was our partner at the beginning of the month, talking about helping families through transitions in healthcare, because you figure you have a doctor in one place and 2 years later you have to uproot and move somewhere else, and you have to find new doctor and medical support. And heaven forbid you have a child that has, some sort of medical health issue. You have to find a team of doctors, and what kind of stress that puts on families. A USO is a community partner. They're awesome. We just did an event with them on Saturday. And then this Thursday, super excited, we have a panel discussion of all military kids spanning from Vietnam era to current. And so we'll get to talk to them and hear about their experiences. I know our Vietnam era, Shelley, her experience coming back, they were stationed overseas in Asia and they came back stateside to Illinois, and her reception, I always thought of the service member, knowing my dad's experience and how that was not a good time for service members in terms of the reception with them coming back. I don't know why I didn't think about how that might impact the children. She had a very poor experience in schools when she came back, because people were not, she was spit at. Just kind of horrific to think of what children might be going through. And they don't even get a vote in that. They go where the parents go. And so I'm really excited to be able to talk to, we have a former Chicago Bear that's going to be on the panel, Jason McKee, and he was stationed and had to go to I think England, and they didn't have American football. So he had to figure it out. And so it just will be a fun conversation around military kids to kind of hear over time, because not much changes. I think that, the eras change, but kind of the fundamentals of military life, are pretty consistent, and I think if you talk to, barring that, military members used to go in, historically, that is a difference. They used to go in, do their service and get out. 2 years. Since the all volunteer force, service members are younger, getting married younger, having families younger, and doing their careers with their families, which is a little bit of a difference now, kind of in modern day. But
and Kelcey, I'm keeping this page up just to remind me to let people know that they could register for this event Thursday, April 15th. It's a Zoom event, children, military families, for 1 hour. It will be 1 p.m. Eastern, noon Central. And it'll also be simulcast on Facebook. I tell you, I would love to have some kids come on. We should be doing this kind of thing. This is really great. It's really, really neat. Does anybody have questions for Kelcey or Kelly?
Kelly, I loved your story.
Oh, Kelly, your story was so great.
And your husband trying the MREs.
Fantastic. And let me share it. Yeah, let's move to Kelly here.
I appreciate that.
Here's the New York Times Magazine story. I fed my husband a combat ration to teach him about my military childhood. That'll learn him. And then it was reprinted in Reader's Digest. And
Text me back, so I just fed you.
hold on, I'm gonna.
Yeah, I was really excited when Reader's Digest republished it. I actually didn't know it was happening. They had told me a while ago that it was going to be republished. They thought April. So I was like, okay, cool. And then my grandma called me all upset mid-March that her friend had got Reader's Digest and read a story that I wrote for it. And I didn't tell her. And I was like, no, I didn't know it was coming out. But yeah, I was really grateful to Reader's Digest for bringing it back to life. I know, Todd, I know it's in the bio, but my father was killed in action in May of 2010. And so for the past 11 years, I've really done a lot around his death. I've done a lot of speaking at different military organization events. I've gotten really close with the Gold Star family community, but I will say, writing this story and publishing it with the New York Times and kind of writing about my military childhood rather than writing about my father's death, it was just such a joy. And it was so much fun to write and so much fun to share that part. Because I feel like when I talk about my story a lot, it always kind of starts with my father's death. But really, I mean, my military childhood is what made me, because I was 18 years old when he was killed in action. So I was a freshman in college. But the 18 years before that, I grew up just like we've been talking about, hopping around from military bases. All of my friends were in the military. And so, yeah, so it's been great to have that out in the world and hear from a lot of people, that their military childhoods were similar or they loved MREs. And I actually heard from quite a few Vietnam veterans that, they didn't have, their C rations were way different than the MREs of today. And so I felt like I wrote the story kind of in a fun way because my husband ate it and I thought it was really funny and I wrote it and felt very grateful that the Times picked it up. But I felt like afterwards I got a really good history lesson in military food that I never knew. So it's it's really fun.
Yeah, you're too young to remember C rations, Kelly. They were really, really good. And Vietnam veterans just rave about them. Hama lima beans. The MREs are really a step down.
The only thing I know is the can opener, the little so we always, my dad always had those, even though he was after C rations. Yes, that. For some reason, we didn't have can openers in our house. We had those. And so like when I got to college, my roommate had a real can opener and I was like, how do you use this? So I don't know if it was just like my dad's army thing, like being very hooah, like I gotta have this very difficult can opener, but yeah.
Look at that. Hanky has one on his keychain. Oh yeah, the P38. This happens to be a P51, a little bit bigger, but you know, it's real
I don't
fancy.
know which one we had. But I did know that those came from old MREs. That's what I didn't know they were called C rations until, like I said, I posted the New York Times piece. But
and the kind
all
of
the old MREs.
and you say that you know, your family didn't. It's not like I don't want to give people the impression that you were like having MREs every night at home. That's not. That was
No.
very, very much opposite the case.
Yeah. I had a lot of people that maybe read the headline and got very concerned for my health. I'm fine. I promise. No, it was very much, my mom was very anti MREs. All I remember, and I wrote it in, was that she would say they would constipate us and we were never allowed to eat them. So we ate MREs when we went camping, and it was like a big deal. We were so excited. And then on the nights that like my dad would babysit, we'd be like, please, can we have MREs? And so it was very like, don't tell your mom, but like they were for very special occasions. So it was very rare that we got an MRE, which I think is what made it so fun as a kid, because it was a surprise, you know, eating an MRE, you didn't know what you were going to get. But yeah, we did not eat them often. And I will say that I love Army food was so funny to me, because we did have a couple Thanksgivings that we ate in a mess hall. When we lived on Fort Rucker and he was a battalion commander, we ate Thanksgiving at the mess hall with his, you know, his soldiers. And so I remember being a kid and just being like, you know, this is awful. I want real Thanksgiving food. But so the I love Army food was kind of funny to me. But yeah.
I love it. And so what do you think your husband learned after eating an MRE?
That I had grown out of a really poor taste. No, I'm a better chef now than I could be. No, but I think that he, you know, I'm a writer, so he's read a lot about my dad. I talk a lot about my dad, but like I said, even still, I met him after my dad had already passed away. So it's been very much the Gold Star family life that he has been a part of with me.
Right.
And so I felt like for me, it was like, and for him too, kind of getting to see that like giddy kid side of me and of my childhood, where it's not the sad, like, okay, we're going to go to another memorial and we're going to go and, you know, talk to this group, or we're going to meet more Gold Star children. It was really that fun, like we got to go on camping trips and eat this weird food. And, you know, so I felt like it's a fun aspect of military childhood.
Kelly, you know, I should have put two and two together before this, but talking to you makes me realize that it's almost as if your military childhood and the changes that you had to learn, you know, to deal with, and the challenges has kind of helped you with your father's death.
Yeah, I think so, especially like I said, I was 18, so I did have kind of the full military life by the time he was killed. And I had 10 years of experience with a war. We were at that point almost in war for 10 years. So it was something that I was sadly used to, and that military children are, you know, kind of grown up thinking. But yeah, so I think it was, but I will also say one thing that's unique, as unique with military children and military families, is the Gold Star community. I never, even growing up in the military, I never really knew much about it. But kind of like my military community growing up. The Gold Star family community also just really, was there for my family, is still there for my family. We always say it's a club that you never wish to join, but once you're in, you're really in it. So I think that the military, I think the strength that comes from that is our foundation of being a part of the military community as a whole.
Yes.
Because I do feel like they're one and the same. Some of my closest friends now are still my friends who I grew up in the military with and moving around with. I'm actually my best friend. She's in her maid of honor in her wedding next spring. And she was my best friend from growing up in the military. So I think it is, that the first, it's weird. My life is like almost these like two sections, but those first 18 years definitely set up for just an easier path.
Richard Kaufman, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I do. I actually have my P-38 that I actually brought back from Vietnam, and it's dated 1962 on it. And I always had it on my keychain, but every time this little lip would come up, it stabbed me in the leg, so I had to quit carrying it. But there's nothing like getting a sea ration of pound cake and finding somebody with peaches. You take the pound cake, you stab it with your fork, pour in the juice from the peaches, and you've got a great dessert. Let me tell you.
Is that right, Larry Gamrett? Larry, I saw you smiling talking about that. Larry.
Yes. We had a great logistics officer when I was in the field. He knew how to get us the MREs. So that was the turkey dinner.
So, okay. So Larry, you're a Vietnam veteran. You've had both the MREs and the C rations. Which are better?
Well, I went in at 130 pounds to come out at 190 with the C rations. Okay. And then when we got the MREs at camp, all right, we used to fight like hell over what particular food that we liked the best. Okay, but I like both of them, all right. I like both of them. That was the best I ever ate in my life because there was nothing else much to eat anyway. Besides gravy in that diesel engine can, they served at that time for Thanksgiving.
Well, you might be interested to know that we spent, we didn't have any programs last week. We called it our spring break. After my, week at Puerto Vallarta, I don't even know where Puerto Vallarta is. That was a joke. I didn't go there. We spent the week putting together our next VBC magazine, which will be coming out we're sending it to the printer in 1 week, and it will feature an article on the P-38 because the history of this little contraption continues to fascinate me.
And I still have a P-38.
And you still have a P-38.
I still have one.
That's so great. Kelly, I was wondering if you could, Hughes, is your hand up? Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to just underscore, the tremendous work that Kelcey and her crew did with Kids Rank. And I know the focus has been on the kids, rightfully so. But it's so much. The one thing in my short tenure with that organization underscored to me, it's more than just the kids themselves. It's about the family. And it really is a tremendous resource for the military family, the parents, as well as the engagement of the kids. So I just wanted to make that point.
Kelly, could you give us an idea of who your father was?
Yeah. So my dad, he grew up in West Caldwell, New Jersey, so just not too far from here. And his dad was a milkman. He had some hearing issues, so he always wanted to serve in the military, but was never medically able to. And so when my father was in high school, he joined the United States Military Academy at West Point and went to West Point to play soccer. And then the goal was never to do a career in the Army. He actually didn't know a lot about the Army since he kind of was different from what we say about the chain of people that went in. Nobody in his family had served. Right. And so he joined and he loved it. He was a Black Hawk pilot, just like my older brother. He went to flight school and then ended up staying in for 24 years. And just overall, he was a great dad. The military kind of up until the most current wars, but throughout the 90s, really gave us the opportunity to spend a lot of time with him. We always lived on post. We always lived in a military community. And so we like I said, we spent a ton of time with him. He coached almost every single one of my soccer teams. And I think that a lot of the reason he loved the military so much and the reason he did so well in the military was he really believed in a lot of the values and a lot of the things that the Army and West Point preached. And he brought a lot of that into our home. And so it was easy for us as kids to live it because we were in that culture all of the time. So when it's, a hard work ethic or valuing honesty or anything like that, we were seeing that, at least from our perspective as kids, like that's what not only was his job, but it was who he was as a person. And so, yeah, he was just a really, really great dad. And
he was a great officer. He was a great leader. And I do encourage people to look up Colonel John McHugh and read a little bit about his life and his service. Kelly, how did he die? Do you know?
Yeah, he was in Kabul with the 10th Mountain Division out of Fort Drum, New York. And they were there for just a routine kind of a pre-deployment site survey, which meant they were surveying the area for the team that was from 10th Mountain that was going to deploy to that area. But before they went down to Kandahar, they had to stop through Kabul to go to the Coin Academy so they could learn a little bit more about the culture and more about what they would be doing. So they were on their way to the Coin Academy when a suicide bomber actually ran into his convoy and killed him and everybody else in his car. And so it was a shock to our entire Army community. There were, at the time, there were only 3 he was only the 3rd colonel that was killed in action. And so it was a big surprise. He wasn't in a combat related field. He was only supposed to be in Afghanistan for about 10 days. Yeah, so it was not I guess there's no typical, military combat death, but yeah, so it was definitely a shock for our family. He was about to put in his retirement papers. Yeah, so.
You're writing a book about him.
I am, yeah, I'm writing a book about our experience kind of as a Gold Star family and about the forever wars. I think my book has kind of changed and evolved over the past 11 years, really. Yeah, I was gonna say I can drop my website if you guys want to read some of my other things.
Yeah, definitely drop the website. And thank you, Chad Riddle, for on the Zoom side dropping the Washington Post you did.
Yeah. So I think my book has evolved in, we're in a war that started when I was 12 years old or 11 years old, I guess when I was 10, and I'm almost 30. And so it's kind of just examining what 20 years of war has done to not only the soldiers, but the families and the culture. And when we say forever war so casually, but really, what does that mean when, 10 years ago, I didn't totally understand what my dad was doing in Afghanistan and why we were still there. And 10 years later, I still am not completely sure. And so kind of taking I don't want to say the stigma, but a little bit out of questioning and being okay with questioning, why our military does what they do. And why we are still there, and maybe what are some of the mistakes that we've made over the past 20 years, and how do we prevent that from happening to future generations, so there aren't more military kids like me, because my nieces, my brother's kids, were born when he was deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, and I just thought it was crazy that my dad and my brother could have been killed in the same wars. And so I think it's like I said, my book started as kind of this like story about my life and my family's story, and is really evolving more into looking at what has 20 years of war done and what can we do differently. So
I'm really excited to read your book, Kelly. There's a lack of female writers for the Generation 9/11 veterans and wars going on, and I think your perspective is going to be really, really interesting to read.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you for writing it.
Yeah, thanks.
I'm really in awe. I'm in awe of Kelly. I'm in awe of Kelcey and of Derek. What we've heard tonight, man, the eloquence. If I had a smidgen of that eloquence, I'd really be somebody, Sean. I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you guys. You got, I mean, truly, I would love to have all of you back to continue the conversation or maybe talk on the podcast or something like that. Because it's just so, I think what your perspectives are so valuable and you communicate them so well to people like me who don't, I work with veterans, but I wasn't born in that world. And it's something that I've learned a lot just in this 90-minute conversation. So thank you so much, Kelly. Does anybody have any other questions or comments? I'm looking at the clock here. Sean, we have a scuttlebutt that came out today, didn't we?
Yeah, it actually mirrors the conversation tonight. We were celebrating. We called it Month of the Military Brat because we thought that was just a better title for the month. But we had a veteran on the podcast. He is from a military family, but we also had a non-veteran on that her father was Army. She moved around a lot through Germany and America, and it was interesting to hear both of them. It was like they'd never met each other, but suddenly they had this bond, and they just started talking. And I could just sit back and listen to like the experiences that both of them had. I learned a lot from it. So I hope that you come and join us. Check it out on our website, veteransbreakfastclub.org. You can also check it out on YouTube. Ellie does the editing. She's incredible at it. It's really fun to watch. And we pick on Ryan All a little bit for those of you who know him, because he was our little TikTok star for a little while. So,
and we got a sponsor. We got
did.
A sponsor for the Scuttlebutt.
Yeah.
The Scuttlebutt is a podcast and a video cast and D&D auto salvage and metal recycling.
Yeah, not Dungeons and Dragons.
No,
Auto
D&D,
salvage.
metal recycling and auto salvage. 2 locations, Lawrenceville and Tarentum. They're junkyards. My dad would have loved that. Henry Shepke, how are you? We have our youngest participant. You have your hand up. How are you, Henry?
I'm doing good.
I'm sorry, but how was your spring break?
Oh, it was good. We went to Florida, my family.
Nice, from Wisconsin. That must have been great.
Yeah, the weather was nice.
That's great.
I wanted to show you some of the MREs that I have in my room.
Okay, very good.
Oh, I'd love to see those.
An
I'll probably
MRE
tell.
collection. Let me see here. Oh gosh, you have some vintage ones, it looks like. What's the pink one?
That's a humanitarian ration that they give to like people in foreign countries, civilians that need food. So
Does that say smoked tuna?
yeah.
That can't be American.
No.
That can't be American. Smoked tuna, what country?
Which one is that?
Underneath middle of the table.
Oh yeah, that one is just a civilian one. So
And then I can recognize that. Is that Lithuanian or Polish?
that's a Lithuanian one.
Lithuanian. Those are good. Those are good. What other 13-year-old kid has an MRE collection? I love it, Henry. This is great. And at the other end, I guess I could say, of the age spectrum, we have Julia Parsons. And Julia, I should tell you now, just so you're not too surprised, that Julia is our cover story for our VBC magazine that'll be coming out. Do you want to, Ellie, would you mind if you can share the cover? You showed it to me.
You win 2 free tickets to our next Zoom program.
For those of you who don't know, Julia Parsons, Navy Wave, she turned 100 on March 2nd. And she was a Navy Wave, a code breaker in World War II, did fascinating work. And
I can't show it because it's frozen.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Well, it'll be a surprise. Yeah, it's a wonderful cover with Julia on it and has her story in it. So Froze, yeah, Frozen. That's his. All right. What a fascinating evening. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for being part of this wonderful conversation. Derek, and do I say Sansone or Sansoni?
Sansone.
Sansone. Derek Sansone, Navy CB with his World War I presentation. Kelcey Liverpool with Kids Rank. I do want to join you on Thursday if I can. Listen in on that conversation Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern. And of course, Kelly McHugh-Stewart, thank you for joining us again. I'm going to get in touch with all of you because I'd love to have you back on. And
Hey, Todd.
Yes.
Could I show our World War I person something?
Yes.
Can you see that at all? Wait a minute. Hold on. Let me get it.
Is that a German helmet?
It is. Hold on.
Hoi. Whoa.
Yeah.
Wow. Where'd you get that?
My great uncle fought in the war. And when I was about, 10 years old, I asked him what it was. And he goes, I killed a kraut and brought it home. And I didn't know what that was, being only 10 years old, of course. And I asked my mother, and she told me, derogatory word for German, but he was in the war. And he brought it home, and it's passed on to me now. So it's just a little tippy top is missing. So I keep it there on my war collection bookshelf.
Boy, that is quite a collection.
Yeah.
That's quite a piece, I should say.
It really is.
Boy,
it really
boy.
is. Yeah. I think it's pretty neat. Everybody, fascinated when they see it. Yeah.
Very neat. Oh man. There's a scene in Mad Men that's just like that, where the grandfather, World War I veteran, shows the kid the helmet, says he took it off, a dead guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a whole conflict in the family about it. So
oh
yeah.
geez.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Just like same story.
Yeah.
Hey, good night. Thank you for joining us. And listen, we have check out the Scuttlebutt, but we're going to be back here on Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. Please do join us. We'll have a lot of great conversation, 9 a.m. for our virtual breakfast. All right. I'll see you then. Have a good night, everyone.